All right, everyone, get ready because today we're diving into something super practical that I think you're going to love.
I think they will too.
We're talking about those little check boxes you see on donation forms.
Ah, yes. The tell me more about planned giving or the I'd love to volunteer boxes.
Exactly. Turns out those tiny check marks can be a gold mine for donor engagement.
Oh, absolutely. And today we're going to unpack how to actually make those check boxes count, not just collect dust.
Right, because what's the point of having them if you're not going to, actually do something with them?
It's like finding buried treasure and then just leaving it there.
100%. And that's where today's source material comes in. It's like a treasure map, guiding us on how to turn those check marks into meaningful connections.
Love that analogy. And it all starts with understanding the psychology behind why those check boxes are so powerful in the first place.
Okay, so walk us through it. Why do those little boxes hold so much sway?
Well, think about it. When someone checks that box, it's not just a random action, it's a micro-commitment. They're raising their hand saying, hey, I'm interested in learning more.
It's like that first little step towards a deeper relationship.
Exactly.
But I think we've all been there. You're up to your elbows in envelopes after a big appeal mailing, and it's easy for those little check marks to get lost in the shuffle.
Oh, it's so true. And I've definitely been guilty of it myself, which is why having a system is so crucial. That's one of the big things our source emphasizes, systematizing your response to those checkboxes.
Okay, I love a good system. So how does that work?
Well, they break it down into the who, how, and when of checkbox review, which I think is super helpful.
All right, so let's start with the who. Who's in charge of those precious little check marks?
So the who is all about clarity. You need to have a specific person or even a team dedicated to reviewing those responses. And get this, they even suggest having a backup person because, well, life happens.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What if someone goes on vacation or has a baby?
Exactly. You don't want those checkboxes falling through the cracks just because someone's out on paternity leave.
Paternity leave, that's fantastic. Those check boxes need love too.
Right. And actually, the source goes a step further, suggesting that maybe someone else even does a second pass looking just for the checkboxes because they can be so easy to miss.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like they have camouflage powers when you're trying to sort through a giant stack of mail.
Totally. And sometimes you're so focused on processing the donations themselves that those little check marks can totally slip under the radar.
Okay, so we've got our dedicated checkbox champion, maybe a sidekick too, to make sure nothing gets missed.
Love it.
Now let's talk about the how. How are we making sure we're catching every single one of these little gold nuggets of engagement? What's the process?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. They actually recommend separating the checkbox review from your initial mail processing.
Wait, really? That feels a little counterintuitive. Explain that one to me.
So think about it. You're in the zone, opening envelopes, recording donations. Having to stop and switch gears to process a checkbox inquiry can really throw off your flow.
It's like a speed bump in your workflow.
Exactly. By having a dedicated time for checkbox review, you're giving those little guys their own dedicated moment to shine.
You're not rushing through it. You're really giving those check marks the attention they deserve.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got our team and our process down. Next up, timing. Right. And that brings us to when. How quickly are we jumping on these little signals of interest? Because timing feels pretty important here.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, think about those. Tell me more about planned giving checkboxes. Our source actually cited some research that found donor interest in planned giving it peaks right at the moment of inquiry.
Oh, wow. So it's like
And then it kind of goes downhill from there, unfortunately.
it's like that window of opportunity is wide open and then it starts to slowly close with every passing day.
Exactly. And we don't want to miss that window, right? We want to connect with our donors while it's still top of mind for them.
Absolutely. So let's say someone checks that box about planned giving. We need to be striking while the iron's hot.
Yes. Especially because those kinds of inquiries often go hand in hand with major life events, a new grandchild, a milestone birthday. It's about being part of that conversation while it's still relevant and meaningful.
Okay, so daily would be amazing, but not always realistic. Monthly feels way too slow. What's the sweet spot here?
So the source recommends aiming for weekly as a good balance between being responsive and, not losing your mind.
Okay, that feels doable.
Right. And honestly, it brings up a really important point. What if? Instead of viewing these checkboxes as just these one-off transactions, What if we saw them as opportunities to start deeper, ongoing conversations with our donors?
Ooh, I love that reframing. It's not just about checking a box and moving on. It's about building that relationship.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our system for identifying those checkboxes. We're responding in a timely way. Now let's talk about what we're actually saying in those responses, because that's where the source's second key point comes in preparing your response before you even get a response.
It sounds a little backwards, right?
It does, a little bit.
But it's about being proactive. When you know exactly how you'll respond to each type of inquiry before those responses start pouring in, it does two things. One, it keeps things consistent. And two, it avoids delays.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's like having a game plan ready to go no matter what someone checks off on that form.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes this idea of tailoring your response to the type of inquiry. So someone checking volunteer is going to get a different response than someone interested in planned giving.
Right, because you don't want to send someone who's interested in volunteering a 20-page brochure about bequest intentions.
Exactly. And then they even take it a step further, saying you should match the response type to the inquiry format. So if someone submitted their donation form online, you'd respond digitally. But if they mailed it in, you'd send a handwritten note back.
Oh, I like that. It shows you're paying attention, speaking their language. It's like...
It's that personal touch.
Yes. Okay, this is all great, but let's be real for a second. A plan that works for handling 3 checkboxes is a whole different ballgame than one that can handle 300 or 3,000.
Right.
Like, how do we actually scale this up from a small batch operation to something that can handle, a real influx of responses?
And that is a great question. It's something that, a lot of organizations struggle with.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's one thing to be super responsive when you've got a handful of inquiries, but when you're talking about hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah. That's where having a system, a truly scalable system, becomes so important. And that leads us perfectly into the source's third big takeaway.
Okay, so bring it on. What's the secret sauce for scaling up without, losing our minds?
So it all starts with getting crystal clear on roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so who's doing what?
Exactly. Who handles what volume of responses? What are the different levels of follow-up? Like, when does something get escalated and to whom?
Oh, that's a good point, because tell me more about volunteering. Checkbox might not need to go all the way to the CEO.
Right. Having all those details ironed out ahead of time makes a world of difference. It keeps things from falling through the cracks.
So it's like we're creating these little roadmaps for the checkboxes to make sure they reach the right destination every time.
Yes, love that. And just like we talked about tailoring the response to the type of inquiry, they also say you should have a plan for handling different volumes. So a small number of planned giving inquiries, maybe a personal phone call makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
But if you get 50 of them after your annual report goes out...
Okay, time to rethink that strategy.
Exactly. Maybe it's a really well-crafted letter or a targeted email series. It's all about finding that balance. Right.
Between personalized engagement and efficiency, which is always a dance.
It is a dance.
Yeah.
It really is. But here's the thing that I want our listeners to really walk away with today. What if, instead of just being these little boxes to check, what if we saw each one as this incredible opportunity?
To do what?
To really deepen a donor's relationship with the organization. What if checking that box was just the first step in this much bigger journey?
It totally changes how you think about those little boxes, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not just about checking it off the to-do list. It's about making it meaningful.
100%. Wow, this has been so eye-opening. I have to admit, I used to be guilty of seeing those check boxes as just one more thing to process, but you've totally changed my perspective. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear. Honestly, because it's not about adding more work to our plates, right?
Yeah.
It's about working smarter. It's about making those interactions count.
Yes, and who doesn't want that?
Oh.
Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Hopefully you found it as useful as we did. And hey, we want to hear from you. How do you wrangle those checkboxes? Share your wisdom, your struggles, your success stories. Let's keep this conversation going on social media. Until next time, happy fundraising.